When the killer is on a mission, the camera is blocked by the beauty. He, who has been trained for a long time, hurriedly moved the scope to the target. But the instinct of the man made him unable to help but take a peek. The killer realized that this would not work, so he quickly stabilized his mind. Then he looked at the watch. Heart rate 65. This is when he was in the best condition. Carl grabbed the gun and concentrated his attention. He was ready to kill, because he had never failed before. As the rich man reappeared in the vision, Carl decided to pull the trigger. But at the critical moment, the beauty suddenly moved her body, just in time to catch the bullet. Carl hurried to the court and wanted to shoot again, but the bodyguard had already found his shooting point and quickly pulled the curtain. The best sniper usually has only one chance. Carl quickly took the gun and picked up the garbage on the ground. Then he put on his helmet and went downstairs quickly. The small electric donkey parked at the door. When the police car came, Carl had already gone out of the alley. Then he threw the clip through the equipment, crossed the alley, and hid behind the police car. Then he threw the helmet into the river at will. The tools were cleaned up. Then he came to a convenience store. He quickly took off his clothes before going to the bathroom. Then he washed his body. As a detail control, he even scratched his beard carefully. When he left, he sprayed a lot of perfume. Everything was handled properly. He quickly walked out. After stopping a taxi, Carl rushed to the airport. Before entering, he took out a self-defense gun, removed the fingerprints on it, and quietly threw it into the trash can. But when he passed the security checkpoint, he found a police dog staring at him. Although Carl had cleaned up the smell on his body, he still dared not bet with the dog's nose, so he decided to give up this flight. He turned to the bathroom and wiped the skin on the outside again. He even left the sink. Details decide life and death. Carl was never careless. Finally, he bought another flight, but just as he was about to board the plane, the boss called. What is happening? Is there a precedent? Is there some problem? Obviously, there's some fucking problem, to say the least. Carl knew that when assassinating a heavyweight, if he failed, the killer would be killed. So now, he is likely to be killed by a double-edged sword. After hanging up the phone, Carl pulled out the phone card and stepped on the phone to prevent himself from being tracked. But even so, Carl did not relax on the plane. He always paid attention to the surroundings. As a result, he found a sunglasses man who seemed to be spying on him. So as soon as he got off the plane, Carl took out another fake identity and handled the mid-flight transfer. But coincidentally, the sunglasses man also handled the transfer, and they also met in the same waiting room. Carl was alerted that this person was probably following him. Carl did not dare to take the risk and immediately moved to the airport hotel, and he also ordered a dinner. It was determined that after the waiter, Carl carefully stood by the door. But Carl was not really hungry, but he needed some weapons. He put the glass cup on the door handle and put the plate close to the door. In this way, when the door is pushed open, the glass cup can fall on the plate and make a sound. Finally, Carl took the knife and sat on the opposite chair and turned off the light. Fortunately, he was safe that night. The sunglasses man did not appear again. Carl finally boarded the plane. He returned to the Dominican Republic. His car was parked outside the airport, but after getting on the road, Carl still did not relax. He kept changing routes and was very careful not to be in sync with any vehicle, because once you are in the same speed, a gun barrel may come out of the window at any time. After a whole day's detour, Carl finally went home. But as soon as he got to the door, he found two big footprints on the ground. This is definitely not his wife's shoes, and there was a pile of cigarettes next to the footprints. This means someone was squatting at the door of his house. This style is not a robbery, but a killer. Carl immediately realized that someone was going to assassinate him, so he quickly took out the pistol in the car and went into the door. He ran to the house in the shadow of the tree, but he found that there were also obvious footprints. This means that the man has entered the house. Carl ran inside with his back to the door. Rock music was playing in the house, but his wife was nowhere to be seen. Carl immediately ran to the bedroom, but it was a mess inside. There was blood on the wall. Carl quickly called his wife. He learned that his wife had been seriously injured and was hospitalized. When he was alone at home, a man and a woman suddenly broke in. A knife was pointed at his head. The little uncle told Carl that the two people were ruthless. His sister was dying, so he left in a green taxi. After Carl heard this, he immediately transferred his wife to a private hospital. Then he went home and started digging. As a special killer, he hid a lot of emergency equipment in his house. His wife didn't know about this. After he took the necessary weapons, Carl dressed up as a tourist and drove to the street to find a green taxi. After finding it, Carl did not get off the car, but quietly remembered the company he belonged to. At night, when there were few people, he went to the company to pretend to have an emergency question. Then he took a step back, put on a sock, raised his gun, and the manager shot him. Finally, Carl entered the control room and checked the driving records of all the taxis. He found a car near his house 2 days ago. Carl withdrew from the search page and found the corresponding owner. He is a young man with curly hair. Carl has obtained all the useful information, but in order to cover up his real purpose, he deliberately messed up the control room and spilled some cash, causing a robbery in the city. Then he left. The next morning, Carl was waiting at the door of the garage. When he saw the young man driving a green taxi, he immediately followed him. After a while, he got off the car in advance. He pretended to be a passenger and got on the young man's car. Then he reported an address. The curly-haired man was driving with all his heart. Carl pulled out a gun. The curly-haired man was so scared that his brain was flying. The curly-haired man hurriedly handed over the wallet. Carl was not interested. He mentioned 2 days ago the passenger who took the car to his house. The curly-haired man still had an impression that the other person was a man and a woman. The man was a body, and the woman was like a cotton swab. After they got off the private plane, the curly-haired man entered a private residence. He came out an hour later and then rushed to the airport. The curly-haired man didn't ask much, so it's not clear what they did after they entered the residence. Although the curly-haired man told everything, the more he said, the faster he died. Carl didn't know who they were, but his boss must have known, because only the boss in the same line of work knew his address. Finally, Carl boarded the plane with a fake ID card. He came to New Orleans. He had 6 warehouses here. It was full of military equipment. With a pistol, 2 bullets, and a new passport, Carl picked one out of a pile of cards and put it in the car. Now, except for real guns and real bullets, he has been selling fake goods from beginning to end. end. The boss lived in a safe and advanced apartment. When he entered, he had to use a CCTV to identify the face in order to open the door. Carl had to dress up as a cleaner and wait outside the apartment for the opportunity to rush in. Soon, a courier opened the door to enter. Carl quickly pulled out the ready trash can. The runner followed him up. The courier got off the elevator on the 4th floor. Carl also followed him out because the boss lived on the 4th floor and was a single. As the courier opened the 4th door, Carl began to count down. Counting to 70, the 4th door was closed, so he had to get into this door. He had to see the door open in 7 seconds. Carl hurriedly walked over and peeked. The witness was the boss's secretary. But a second before the courier came out, Carl had moved to the faucet and pretended to be drinking water. The courier didn't care. He just opened the door and left, and Carl sneaked in again. Then he got up at the last second. Speaking of which, it reminds me of a good thing. If you want to fall in love, you can't always meet girls around you who meet your requirements and are attracted to you. Go hold hands. You don't have to worry about the requirements. The more requirements you have, the more accurate you find. If you want to find someone, just hold hands. Carl left the trash can outside. He only took a gun and a toolbox to get in. Seeing Carl, the secretary was terrified, but Carl's target was not him, but the old man. Carl took out the rope and asked the secretary to tie the old man to the chair first, then tie himself to the bathroom. But when Carl closed the door, he deliberately left a gap to pay attention to the secretary's movements at any time. On the surface, the old man is a lawyer. In fact, he is the boss of various assassination missions. Carl's wife was seriously injured and hospitalized. Someone asked the old man to make a deal, because 2 days ago, Carl failed to assassinate a rich man, so the customer made another order. He wanted to give Carl a warning to make him work harder next time. Carl wanted to know who the customer was, but the old man kept the spirit of the contract and refused to say anything. Carl took out the air gun without saying a word. Then he put a steel nail on his computer and mobile phone. The old man said right away that the customer's information was stored in the computer. This time, he really couldn't find it. Carl didn't believe this nonsense and put the air gun directly on the old man. 3 steel nails were inserted into the chest. If it couldn't be pulled out in 6 minutes, he would die of suffocation. The old man said even if he was nailed to death, he would not betray the customer. But after 3 minutes, the old man fell to the ground in pain. Carl quickly took out a piece of newspaper and carefully placed it under the old man's body to prevent the blood from falling to the ground. But he didn't expect that the old man who secretly smoked didn't last 6 minutes at all. He suddenly had a heart attack and died. Carl was not panicked. He pushed the trash can outside and put the old man in it. The scene was cleaned up. Finally, he opened the door of the bathroom. The secretary had already given birth. Hurry up and beg him to spare his life. I know who they were. I will give you those names. But promise me you won't leave things looking the wrong way. Carl let the secretary go. Then he pushed the body into the elevator with him. But at this time, 2 more people entered the elevator. The secretary didn't dare to ask for help because he knew Carl's cold blood. As long as he had a little action, he would hang up immediately. The secretary took Carl back to his house and found the order to chase him to death. There were 2 phone numbers on the back of the order. The owner of the account was the cousin and sister who chased him to death. On the other order, it was the information of the customer, Edward. Carl knew what he wanted. The secretary thought he would let himself go. But when he went down the stairs, Carl quickly took action and broke the secretary's neck. This kind of death looks like a corpse falling from a building. Then Carl pulled the body of the old man to his warehouse to melt the corpse. The 140-pound old man was put in a 10-liter vinegar barrel and finally returned to the sea. Carl washed the car thoroughly and then changed the license plate to look for his brother. He is more suitable to be a hunter than to be someone else's prey. When he arrived at the destination, Carl rented a car with a fake identity. Then he went to his brother's house to pick up the pickaxe. He found that his brother had a big wolf dog. Then he bought steak, sleeping pills, and malt wine. At night, Carl went to his brother's house. The dog noticed it at the first time and immediately ran away. But when Carl greeted him with the steaks soaked in malt wine, Carl entered the house. Carl was more at ease when he saw that the dog had entered the dream. But as soon as he walked into the room, his brother started to attack. Carl was caught off guard and was beaten hard. His brother's muscles were broken. It was obvious that he was a professional. Carl was destined to lose if he fought hard, so he grabbed the iron hook next to the window and hooked it into his brother's muscles. But he didn't expect that this man was also a tough guy. He actually endured the pain and touched the gun. Carl couldn't resist this firepower. He quickly ran into the room and found the gun under the bed. At this time, the enemy was just chasing him to the door. But the next second, Carl successfully killed his brother. But the gunshot also woke up the dog in the dream. He realized that he was greedy for food and lost his job. The dog rushed into the room with guilt when he saw the dead owner. The dog ran towards Carl. At first glance, the dog wanted to bite him, but Carl cleverly jumped outside. Finally, he lit the torch and threw it into the house. Although the dog was a witness, Carl believed that he wouldn't say a word. Carl cleaned himself in the bathroom at the airport and pretended to kill Mian Kiao. After locking the target, he followed him all the way. When he found that the enemy went to a Western restaurant for a date, Carl went in boldly, because when a woman was killed, the first suspect must be her husband or boyfriend, so Carl was fearless. When he took Mian Kiao's boyfriend to the bathroom, he sat in his seat and quickly took out his gun. Mian Kiao was surprised. He knew that he would die tonight, so he asked for the last dinner. Carl still had this kind of kindness, but then Mian Kiao asked for a walk. After the last few steps of his life, Carl suddenly shot. He is a straight man killer. He has no emotional cells. Fast battle and quick victory are his style.